What's happened is the Yemeni economy has grown such that the remittances now, which used to be a key part. If you look at the successful development economies over the last, 30 years, the one thing that you see, and here I'm building on Danny Roderick. I highly recommend the work of Danny Roderick and Joseph Stiglitz on these development issues. It doesn't go to a poor economy that's trying to develop. It goes to where the profits are. It goes to where economy is already growing. So if you want foreign investment, you've got to grow. The key thing is to be growing first. If you look at the experience in the last 30 years, it's not foreign direct investment that has transformed economies. It's a domestic investment plan. It's domestic. It's the national bourgeoisie. It's the national actors who develop the economy. They're the key ones. They're the ones that will invest in the country. They're the ones that have a long-term plan for what can be done there. Foreign investment comes later. They come in, they say, oh, there's a great opportunity. This is a growing economy. There's lots of opportunity here. You've got to make the opportunity first, and then the foreign investment. It's not something to be relied upon. Of course, there are benefits. There can be benefits. There can be negatives also of foreign direct investment. And that also involves state capacity to be able to negotiate, what sort of investment. If you look at Korea, look at South Korea, they didn't allow foreign direct investment. There was none. None. They grew fast. They grew really fast. Okay? So it depends on capacity, and it's not something that should be it's not the primary thing. And often bank will focus on that. They say, the role of the state is to stabilize economy, fiscal conservancy, no debt, sort of basic infrastructure, and then sort of, wait for the foreign direct investment to come. That's not the way you grow. You grow internally. You grow by stimulating domestic investments.
Joanne Cummings, Department of State. I want to take you back to what you were saying right at the end of your talk on water. And I do agree with you that it's possible to overstate the crisis. And historically, of course, Yemen has been phenomenal in its traditional ways of dealing with water. How do you see the relationship between the use of water now, including bore wells, with the transfer, the changes in land tenure, in water rights on held land, tribal rights versus private property rights, all of which have added to the political tension with the Houthis, for instance?
Yeah, good question. The way I see this, the way I understand it is, of course, in the Middle East, traditional property rights were based upon water, usually. And they were based on a certain technology where you could produce water. And the Boers undermined this. All throughout the Middle East, somebody going in, you could go, usually it was, there was a stream of water, and the guys with the best land had it right where the water source was, and the value of the land would go down as you got further away from that source because it didn't get as regular water. And that was the basis of the distribution of land rights. It was based on the water. And of course, then now you come along and do just a little bit of capital, you can undermine that. And not only that, you can undermine it and you can make the water go away. So the water from the traditional source goes away, and now the guy with the bore well has got access to all the water, and so the whole system changes. And that's where the state comes in. And there is a World Bank plan, a very nice World Bank plan for Yemen. And the Yemenis had a tremendous amount of input in it. And what it did was it tried to regionalize the water base, make water management based upon the water basins, each of the catchment basins and where they are. And that, what it requires is a transition to a new set of technologies. They have to regulate the bore well. They have to know what is sustainable in terms of withdrawals, and they have to be able to enforce it in the local areas, and you have to have buy-in. So that they were building, they had these regional water agency things. Those are great. But once again, it's legitimacy, And Yemenis know there's a crisis. It's not like they don't know there's a crisis. They need a legitimate solution. And right now there's no... Well, hopefully there will be, but as of yet, there's no legitimate solution on that. Let me add one thing about that I forgot to say. I think it's very important. There's this concept that came out, again, at the World Bank, I think, called virtual water, which is a very important one for Yemen. That is, you look at a commodity, and you look at the water that's needed for its production. So, for example, rice, for doing a tremendous amount of water. Rice is one of the staples of the Yemeni diet. They don't grow the rice, they import it. Well, when they're doing it, they're importing a lot of water, in actual fact. And Yemen has to think in terms, because people say agricultural development. there are limitations on the capacity of Yemen to develop agriculturally based upon the water, the scarcity of water. But there are some very interesting things, and I was talking to, I forget his name, he's the ex-water minister, and there's a lot of talk about importing GAT from Ethiopia. That is an example of a very wise use of virtual water, because GAT uses a tremendous amount of water. If they could import it from Ethiopia, get Yemeni investors to go and do it, to organize, because Yemenis know how to do it, get them to go over and do it, negotiate the thing, that would reduce a lot of the water consumption over there. That kind of thinking, it's not just economics, but it's also thinking in terms of the water usage, which Yemen is going to have to start thinking about. And of course, there's another big issue: how do you compensate the GAT growers? Because it's a huge transfer of wealth to the countryside. All the farmers that are doing the GAT. That's the states. They have to get in there and compensate. Either they organize production for them in Ethiopia or something like that. But they got to keep social peace when you're playing with the economy like that.
Question in the back.
As you're probably aware, that today's Post has an article on the Yemeni secession movement in the south. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised to, as a sort of a graduate of Yemen, pre-unification, I was surprised to hear that 80%, according to the guy, I don't know if it's true or not, he said 80% of the oil reserves are in the south. Does this pose a possibility that we might see in Yemen something like familiar that we've seen in Sudan with the creation of another mini state?
That was an issue immediately after the war. The Soviets, when Gorbachev in the mid-'80s said, we're not going to support our third world clients anymore, we're going to cut you off, the Yemenis, of course, freaked because they were very dependent upon the Soviets. And the Soviets were good guys. They were desperately trying to develop Yemeni oil in the south because they wanted to get rid of the burden of their Yemeni comrades and to sort of give them a basis to survive. And they did find oil, but they weren't able to develop it. And part of the Union agreement was the Yemeni, the Southerners, wanting access to Western foreign investment. They wanted access to the oil companies of the West. And that was a major part of the agreement. And when the Masila bloc became so productive, it sort of just added to the resentment that the Southerners felt after the war in 1994, that they sort of got screwed. That all their resources are being taken. And the reason that we had the war was that the Northerners were taking our oil and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I mean I'll just say without elaboration that the secessionist movement in the South, I really wonder how representative it is. It may be kind of a negotiating card. It may be we're throwing this out there, and that I bet if there's a legitimate government in Sana'a, that a lot of Southern society would support kind of a renegotiation of its relationship with Sana'a without succession. That's just the sense that I have. It's a question that I throw out there. That's my sense, though.
Hi, I'm Fatima, the Econ Officer in the Yemeni Embassy. Charles, thank you so much. It's been a very good, thorough overlook on the situation, economic situation in Yemen. I appreciated the history of it, and I also appreciated the long-term and short-term issues that you've highlighted, and especially in capacity building. And that I agree with you 100%. But one major theme, or one thing that I particularly liked is when you spoke about the Yemeni state having really no capacity, and always it goes back to the Yemeni society to organize. And I think one trap that we keep falling into time after time is the state has to trap, where we keep on setting institutions that sometimes even replicate what's going on the ground, not realizing that there's an informal system altogether.